I'm really thankful to him for letting me come to speak to you all today. So the first part of my presentation, I'm just going to walk you really quickly through my journey of how I got into user experience, where I started, and how I got to where I am today. Okay, so like I said, really quick overview of where I started, which was in journalism graphics through my design career, and now where I am today, which is a user experience designer and researcher with Fidelity Investments. So I went to Ball State University, which is in Indiana in the United States, and I majored in journalism graphics, and I minored in printing and sociology. So how are those related to user experience? Well, a lot of journalism is communication, and so that is really critical and key skills to have as the user experience designer. I also had a high interest in people, socialization, and groups, and so that's why I got my minor in sociology. In my degree, which was journalism graphics, which prepped me for, I guess the major is pretty much information graphics and designing for print publications, so newspapers and magazines. And in that foundation, I got a lot of experience in typography and color theory and design theories. So this is where I really got those grassroots started of understanding those very basic design principles. And through journalism, I also gained that I always have been a kind of a curious person. And I think that's a really strong trait for user experience designers too, to be curious, to ask questions, and to push back on the status quo. That's something that's a really good trait to have as a user experience designer. So my first set of jobs were in print design. I worked for daily newspapers, weekly newspapers, monthly lifestyle magazines, and even a weekly and monthly trade magazine for the movie industry out in Hollywood, California. Here's some examples of visual design that I did for some of the print publications that I worked for previously. And so how is that relevant? Well, it's carrying those visual design skills into print. And again, those foundations in journalism are coming through in communication. So I was often designing pages with the user. At that point, it was the reader in mind, and knowing that at times they can't really read long articles. So I like to put entry points into these stories, like pulled quotes and captions, catchy headlines and photographs. So if they only had a few minutes to look at some information, at least I could design it in a way that they could get something quick bang for their buck if they had just a moment to get some gist out of the story. After that, I moved into marketing, and I became a art director, graphic designer at a major law firm in Los Angeles, working in their marketing department. So there, I designed a lot of different kind of promotional and marketing materials, from invitations, even in multiple languages, because we have offices throughout different countries, information graphics, a lot of print design. But then I also moved into web. At the time that I was at the law firm, we were going through a redesign for the website. And so this was also the time that UX first came on my radar. I went to a meetup in Los Angeles, that's where I lived before, and at an agency called Huge. I don't know if anybody's heard of that, but I went there for a meetup and I heard about user experience, and I was like, oh yes, this is for me. This is definitely where I want to be. So can you guys still hear me? Just want to make sure, because it seems frozen. Yep. Yeah, okay, you froze for a second, just want to make sure. So I found out about user experience, and I wanted to use some of these new skills that I was learning about in my job. So that's why I did a competitive analysis of other major law firms in the same kind of vein to understand how they were presenting their websites on both desktop and mobile. So how is this skill set and my time in the marketing department related to user experience? Well, again, I'm still working on visual design, but now I'm kind of transitioning from print to web. I could see the forest for the trees, pun intended, and I could see that print was dying. Subscriptions to newspapers were lower. The articles the materials that we were designing for the law firms were getting sent out digitally instead of printed. So I knew that I needed to transition out of a strict print designer into something more digital. And like I mentioned before, this was the time that when I was at the law firm, the first was aware of user experience. And I fell in love with it. I got the bug, and I knew that this was where my journey needed to take me. But it wasn't simple. I can't just, as an art director and a graphic designer, I can't throw UX in my title and just become a UX designer. I had to do something more. So I went to Cal State Fullerton, which is in Southern California, and got a certification in user experience. And I also took on some side projects to help get more work in my portfolio. Excuse me. I didn't have a lot of UX work being a print and graphic designer, so I needed to get those clips in my portfolio. So by taking on these side projects, that gave me the opportunity to do that. So here's some examples of some of the UX work that I started to do either in my class or my side projects. On the left-hand side, this was me. I went down to Hollywood Boulevard to do some ethnographic research. And for those who might not be familiar with ethnographic research, that's when you go and observe a user in their natural environment. And in this case, it was tourists on Hollywood Boulevard. I was doing some research for a Hollywood Boulevard app, and I wanted to understand how tourists were interacting with that experience. Then on the right is a competitive analysis I did while I was working for Community Coalition. And Community Coalition, also known as COCO, is a grassroots organization in South Central Los Angeles that I volunteered some time for to get some clips into my portfolio. Here's a couple more examples of how I was building out my portfolio but taking on these side projects. And on the left here was kind of a higher res, I would call it a wireframe. It's sort of maybe visual design, but it wasn't the design I was really going for. It was more for structural layout and learning how to kind of annotate those wireframes. And then on the right are the personas I did as the customers. Athena Restaurant Initiative was a family friend had an idea to come up with a Greek restaurant that you would order on a tablet or an iPad. You would do all your ordering instead of a paper menu. And so I was doing some research on what kind of personas could our customers be. These are archetypes of the customers that this business anticipated. So how are this continuing education and these side projects relevant to user experience? Well, it gave me an opportunity to get involved in the community. And along those same lines, get involved in the user experience community. This was a time when I was attending a lot of meetups and really getting involved with meeting people and learning how they're working, getting their tips and tricks on how they're working in their environment so that I could apply it potentially to mine. It was also a good chance for me to build out my portfolio with some of this free work instead of just, redesigning Amazon or just redesigning Google. This was real work that was going to be published and on somebody's website, and I could use that experience and put that in my portfolio. And I did get certified, but I was always learning. So I was reading a lot of articles and books and really trying to prepare just beyond what the standard education system was giving me. I was consuming as much as possible whenever I could. So then finally, I did land my first UX job, and I've worked in a variety of industries. I've worked for consumer, I've worked for pet and healthcare, financial companies, security, and technology. And my skill set as a UX designer has also evolved. Starting out, I would say I was more of a visual designer. Since I came from a graphic design, art director background, it was easy for me to transition into UI design or visual design. And then as I learned more, I got more skills in UX design and then research and then strategy, which is planning projects, right? Like I get a project and I need to figure out what we need to build at what cadence, how does that fit into sprints, what research needs to be done, coming up with a strategy for that project. And then finally, considered somewhat of a leader in the UX community here, at least locally. So like I mentioned, going into UI design was a simple step in the right direction. I designed apps. Back then, it was in Photoshop. I don't know what tools you guys are using to mock up your pages and whatnot, but I used Photoshop. Now I use Sketch, but these were created in Photoshop. And then I learned about some more of these UX deliverables that accompany a project, right? Not just that final prettier design, but show us your process. How did you get to those designs? What did you learn along the way? What information did you use to inform that design? And so this is when I really got into designing things like personas, journey maps, task analysis, those sort of deliverables that you share with your team so that everybody can understand how we're getting to the design decisions that we are. And along those lines is research. Research is often the way that you define those deliverables. So here on the left, I'm in an animal hospital sitting next to a veterinarian, watching her use the software that I worked on. So I'm seeing how she's using it. I'm seeing her struggles. I'm seeing her hacks on how she's working around things and really learning from the user's point of view how the software is being used. And then on the right, that is me with a woman in a lab, a research lab, and she's doing a usability test. That screen in the middle is the screen that she's looking at. That was something that was created in Sketch. It was a clickable prototype, and she was going through that prototype and testing it out for us in the lab. And then finally, a community leader. I co-founded IXDA Dallas. I also co-founded a group called UX Research and Strategy. I'm a speaker at several meetups locally. And then this year I was a speaker, spoke about cognitive dissonance at Big Design, which is a local conference, but it does draw people from all over the country and some international attendees as well. So pretty substantial conference that happens to happen here in Dallas. And I just want to give one more little plug to UX and Research and Strategy group. We're on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram. We just passed 5,000 connections on LinkedIn. And we only formed at the end of April. So in less than 6 months, we've grown to 5,000. So you can see that there's a little bit of interest in UX research and strategy in our community. So I'm happy that to be a part of that. And that's all I have. Oh, sorry, major takeaways from my journey is that in user experience, you can go into a variety of paths. You could be a researcher, you could be a UX designer, you could be a front-end developer. There's a lot of opportunity in the UX profession. Also, you can go into a variety of industries. I've done health, I've done financial, I've done security, I've done enterprise, you could do consumer, you could do mobile. There's a lot of opportunity for you to work in whatever industry you want or to try different things. Don't feel like you have to be stuck in one industry. Your skill set will be transferable to anything. And I would encourage you to build out your portfolio and your experience. Certainly you are getting a good foundation at Lambda, but you're gonna need a lot to really be getting your foot in the door. You're gonna need a strong portfolio and to show some experience outside of class and in class. And so always be open to how you might be building out that community, whether that be maybe you redesign a local church or business's website and get some UX experience doing that, helping them make their business better. Also, get involved in the UX community locally. It's your network, it's your people. They're here to help you. So make sure that. Sorry.
I need to mute.
Okay. So also get back your skills.
Would everyone just mind muting really quickly? Sorry about that.
Next step.
Can't find where that's going.
No problem. Also get back to your community by teaching. Teach your skills, pay it forward. Get yourself a mentee and make sure that you're helping bring them along to their UX journey as well. And finally, in user experience, I find you're always going to be learning. You're never going to stop learning. There's always a new tool around the corner, a new process, a new something or other, a new theory. It's exciting to be always learning, but if you think just come out of Lambda and you're going to be done and you're going to learn everything you're ever going to need for the rest of your career, I got news for you. It's a little bit more than that. So just be open and excited about learning even beyond where you are today. So that's kind of my journey. I hope that makes some sense. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them. I don't know if you want to answer them now or if you want to wait till after the other presentation. That's completely up to you.
I think it'd be great if you continued on your presentation so that we can get it all in, and then we can answer questions about either side of things at the end.
Absolutely. Perfect. Okay, so can everybody see my screen? Yep. Okay, great. I'm going to switch gears a little bit. I'm going to talk about enterprise service design and research and how that informs enterprise software. So when I talk about enterprise software, I'm not talking about this spaceship kind of thing that you're seeing here. What I'm talking about is software that's used more so to satisfy the needs of a company or an organization rather than you as an individual. It's usually pretty old. It's usually pretty ugly. It's not, and it's something that people spend hours in, and it's not something that really provides a lot of delight. So something like, say, Microsoft Word or Excel, I would consider those enterprise software. So this is some lovely software that I was working on at the security company I was working on. And I just love the color scheme here. Isn't this very contemporary and modern? Yes, I hope you're sensing my sarcasm because that's completely intentional. Yeah, this is what they're working on. Pretty stuff. Ooh. Here's another screen. Lots of buttons, lots of small fonts, lots of beauty happening here. And this is not uncommon to see in even large corporations. You'll see software still like this that looks like it should have been retired like 30 years ago. This is still happening. And so it's a really good, it's a really good prospect for you as a designer because it's low-hanging fruit. I mean, think about the ways that this could be improved. Like, so simple, right? There's so much opportunity here. So and then the other, so we know what enterprise software is and what it looks like. Now let's talk about service design a little bit. And I don't know if anybody here is familiar with service design, but a little bit. Okay, for those who may not know, service design is an activity of planning and organizing somebody's resources in order to improve the employee's experience, and then you indirectly improve the customer's experience. So I'm not sure if anybody here has seen something like this, a service design blueprint, where the top level here, these yellow gold boxes, are every step in the customer's actions. This is every step that they do through the process. And then you take a deeper dive within every step of that process. But we're going to revisit this more a little bit later. This concept of a service design blueprint came from Adaptive Path. But again, we're going to talk about this a little bit later. I just want you to be thinking about this as we go through this talk. So what was the problem I was trying to solve? Well, this company is a security company, and what they do is they monitor another organization's internet traffic. They make sure there's no malware coming into their system. Nothing's passing the firewall. No one's illegally downloading BitTorrents on their system. All those kind of things. They monitor those things for companies because they don't have the resources to do that. So as part of that service, we would create reports for that company so that they understood what was going on in their system. And here's some examples of the data that was being shown in these reports. Yeah, really flashy and fancy, but we're going to revisit this a little bit more later. Just want to give you a little visual of what we're kind of talking about when I say these reports for customers. So here's the problem we're trying to solve. To build this report is usually done by one person, and it takes up to 2 hours per report. So think about the math there. You've got 30 to 40 companies that need a report every month, and it takes up to 2 hours. Well, that simply doesn't scale. So what they wanted to do was automate this process, simplify this process so that one person wasn't devoting so much time to creating this report. And does this report meet the customer needs? Are we providing the information that they need to that other organization? And as you could see from some of the graphics, the presentation was really just disjointed. They were using different fonts, different color schemes, didn't feel like the whole same report. So I thought this was a great opportunity to do a number of research methods, but including service design, doing a deep dive into this report making process. Excuse me, because again, what we're trying to do is automate this report building so that one guy's not devoting 2 hours to building a report. So this was my plan of attack. I was going to first do a heuristic evaluation. And for those who may not know what that is, a heuristic evaluation is when the UX expert looks at something and sees if there's any usability issues, sees if there's any design issues. It's basically just getting familiar with the product to make sure we know what it is and what problems do we see. And this can be done on software, but it can also be done on anything. So I think it's a great step when you step into your job as a UX designer. Do a heuristic evaluation of your product. Know what you're dealing with. Then I wanted to find out if the report is meeting the customer needs. And I was going to do that through customer interviews. Then I was going to do ethnographic research, which we kind of talked about a little bit in the presentation, where it's also known as side-by-sides, where you sit with the participant, or be standing, but you go with them through their process. So you understand every bit along the way what they're doing. And then after doing this research, applying all that I learned through this service design blueprint method. And once we understand the gaps and the opportunities in the process flow, then make recommendations on the design and improvements. So like I said, the first thing was a heuristic evaluation, and I looked at the report design, seeing what we have in there, what is inconsistent, what are some design flaws, information flaws, very basic, what are we dealing with? And let's just take a second to look at these charts. See in the top left, you see that there's like this tall red bar, and then there's some black bars in between it, this 3D kind of graphic here. Well, it's hard to even know what this data is about. Like the bars are so far from the scale, I can't really tell what's going on here. What are the values here? And also with that red chart that's standing up in the back, what if that was shorter than the black ones in the front of it? You wouldn't even be able to see it. So this 3D chart sure looks fancy, but it's not very practical. It's not very helpful. And then this gray and white chart on the top right, it's not consistent. This isn't anything else like the other two charts on this page. So we're switching around styles, and it feels very disjointed. And then finally, this blue chart in the bottom right, this makes me laugh that this existed. This is to indicate how long it took the agent to open and close a ticket. Whenever they see an incident happening on the customer's server, what it might be, then how it took X amount of time to close the ticket, or sorry, open the ticket, figure it out what the problem is, resolve it, and then close the ticket. This timing was in seconds. Top value here is 28,000, over 28,000 seconds. Who thinks in terms of seconds? No one. We think in terms of minutes or hours. So customers were not very happy that this was coming out in second value. So then the next step I did was to talk to customers. Are we meeting their needs? Are we putting the right information in reports? And they were like, it's nice, but it could be better. You could be giving me things that I could take back to my boss and take action on. Throwing a bunch of numbers at me is not giving me context. You say there's problems on my server. Well, what about that? Is this a common trend? Is this something I need to watch? Is this due to an incident that's happening, like some kind of malware that's attacking the world? What's happening? Give me the context so I can say, okay, I know this is happening, and I'm going to go to my boss, and I'm going to tell him what I'm going to do about it. They also wanted it a bit more personalized. Is this on par with what's happening in the industry? Are our competitors dealing with the same thing? Providing that context was really valuable to these people who were owning the company. And they, like I said, they thought some of it was fine. It was nice to show these numbers, and they look pretty and fancy and all that. But they really wanted to say, show me where the holes are in my system. Show me my vulnerabilities, and then tell me what I can do about that. How can I make my service more secure? So after I kind of figured out what customers wanted, then it was time to sit down and figure out, what is this process? What does it really take to build a report? And so I sat with, I'll call him Bro Sales, because that was his nickname, the one guy who wrote most of the reports. I sat with him and I'm like, look, let's walk through everything that you do. Show me what you do. And so this is where ethnographic research comes in, and I sit with him. And let me just say, if you ever have the opportunity to do ethnographic research over an interview after the fact, definitely take them up on ethnographic research. Sit with them. You're going to see so much more than the things that you think they're going to tell you. You're going to see the hacks that they use, the problems they have that I promise you, they'll forget to tell you. You'll see the mistakes they make. I saw bro sales manually make the wrong calculation, and he would never, first of all, he didn't even notice that he did it. Second, he probably never would have told me that he did make that mistake. So by sitting with somebody and really seeing this firsthand, you're going to learn so much more. It also gave me the opportunity to like, how long are these tasks taking? And what systems is he jumping in and out of? So that's my plug of ethnographic research right there. If you ever have the chance to do it, definitely do it. You will learn so much more. So like I said, this is where you can see where they're making errors, human errors, and they're not going to report that. Just trust me on that. I've done it both ways, and people just forget some of the things. If you're telling them about a long process, they're going to forget some of those little things along the way. But if you're sitting there, you can jot them all down and record every little thing that they do. And so what I discovered when I sat with Bro Sales is he was in all kinds of applications. He was in multiple applications that are specific to this team. He was on the internet. He was on a calculator. He was bouncing from Word to Excel. Plus, he was doing all these actions. He was running scripts. He was running reports. He was doing calculations in a calculator, copying and pasting. So many things. He was doing all the things. So after I figured out, okay, here's the steps, I went low resolution and just kind of grew it out on the whiteboard. Here's where I think the major steps are. And I really encourage you to not open up Sketch or whatever, InDesign or whatever tool you might be using to map some of these user flows. Do it low res first because it's so easy to fix here. So I got it on the whiteboard, did it very simple, and just like, let me just make sure I've got the basics down. Then I went a little higher resolution, sticky notes. Again, still very low resolution, right? Because I can move these sticky notes around on the piece of paper, on the whiteboard. Now I had one teeny tiny little whiteboard at my desk. So I had to go big. I did not have the room on my whiteboard to do this. So I kind of took over the office. This process, I kid you not, wrapped around 5 cubicles. It really did. And what was great about doing it this way is it gave this project visibility. People were like, whoa, what's going on here? What's all this stuff? And they would come over and I would be very happy to tell them. It was also really great to share with, I had Bro Sales come up and review it, and we weren't sitting crouched around a little computer trying, this was the whole big holistic picture. That's the whole point of a service design blueprint. Let's look at this all mapped out, what's going on here. And I could get the developers up here having a conversation and let them see, here's what I'm finding out, this is what we're looking at. And they could really see this whole process laid out, even though I was wrapping around their cubicles. They seemed okay with it. They weren't too angry about that, so that was good. So back to the service design blueprint. The traditional blueprint, you're somewhat familiar with it, is like I said, the customer actions along the top. And then it's the next row, the red row, is those touch points where they interact with your company. The cyan kind of blue turquoise color is where they interact with your company as employees. And then there's this whole below the line thing that's happening that they don't even know what's going on. So let me walk you through an example. Let's say you want to buy some deli meat and you walk into the grocery store. So I'm going to go through the gold section. I'm going to talk about all my steps. I'm walking into the grocery store. I go over to the deli counter. I look, I'm a little confused. Oh, I take a number and then they call my number. And I go over to the counter and I tell the man I need a half a pound of ham. And then I step back and wait for that to happen. And then they call my number out and somebody else brings me that half a pound of ham all wrapped up in the plastic stuff. And then I take that half a pound of ham up to the front cash register and check out. So those are all my steps. So some of the touch points along the way could be, I'm coming into the store. I'm talking to the first person at the deli counter, giving them my order. I'm getting the meat from somebody else at the deli counter. Somebody else cut it, it looks like. And then I'm talking and working to an employee when I'm checking out at the register at the end. And some of those are staff actions too, right? Like those are the points. The touch points are where I'm coming into contact with the store. So other touch points would be I take a number out of at the deli market. But staff interactions is those people I'm directly interacting with in this process. And then what's happening below the line? Well, somebody else took my meat and cut it in the back because somebody else brought me the meat. So who else is working back there? What else is going on behind the scenes that I don't see happening? And then what are those support processes? It could be machines, it could be computers. So in this case, it could be the machine that slices the meat, and then another machine that weighs the meat, and then another machine that puts that plastic wrap on it with the barcode so that I know how much it's going to cost me. And then when I go back up to the front register, you know, what's happening behind the scenes to calculate those numbers and give me the price and that sort of thing. And maybe inventory, right? Maybe it's calculating inventory for the store as well. So that's what a traditional service design blueprint is. But I wanted to modify this for my process. I'm not talking about customer touch points. I'm talking about building a report, all the steps in building a report. So it's slightly different. So how can I apply this concept of every step in a process, yet a deeper dive to the report building process? And so this is what I did. What you see here is the yellow stickies along the top are the actions. These are the steps in the process. These are what Pro Sales was doing just to build the report. The orange stickies were some additional observations that I had, like maybe how he works their process, or just some more notes so I knew a little bit more of what was happening. Then the pink ones are kind of my editorial comments, my notes that like, this takes a long time, or, oh, there's prone for error here, or, you know, like kind of starting to think about where recommendations could happen, where improvements could happen. And I made them separate because I wanted it to be clear that what I was thinking were problems or opportunities were not the same as the actual steps in the process. So it was important to differentiate those two. And then here at the bottom, these are screen grabs, so visual representations of every system that he's interacting with when he's building these steps. And then finally, in the bottom middle, these little colored tabs are the software that they're using at that point so that they could see what software that person was utilizing. So after I kind of mapped this all out, this is when I reviewed it with Bro Sales to make sure that I have every step. Is it accurate? Am I missing something? And then this was also the time to start talking with developers. The whole goal of this process is to automate this report. Well, how are we going to do that when somebody is jumping in and out of systems, multiple systems, manually copying and pasting, manually calculating? Sure, there's opportunities to do that, but we have to figure out what's feasible, what's doable. And I think when this project got started, they had no idea how much work was wrapped up into creating these reports. Bro Sales himself said he had no idea he did this many steps, no clue. So the person who made the report didn't know how much it was. I can promise you their managers had even less of a clue. And so after I did kind of a couple rounds of low res, like I said, the digital the whiteboard, and then post-it notes, then I needed to make it into a format that was consumable for others. I can't expect everybody to keep coming up to my cubicle to look at all the pretty things. No, I needed to make it into something that could be shared. So I did it in Google Docs because everybody at this workplace had access to Google Docs. And then I matched the colors with what they were on the sticky notes. So the top here is the steps in the process. The multicolored ones is the application that they were using for that step. The E, those are the reference to the screen grabs so that they could know go look at the screen. The orange was some additional notes, like how long it takes to do something, and what types of Excel documents, that sort of thing. And then finally, pink was my comments, like it's time consuming to wait for data, and it's time consuming and prone to human error. So noting all of that information as well. So what were the next steps? after I did all this research, so what? Now what? Well, we had to look at what technically we could automate. Like I said, it wasn't as simple as flipping a switch. We found out this was way more complex than we thought it was going to be. So what can we actually automate and what still needs to be done manually? And then after talking with customers, what can we remove from this report? Because they just don't need it. They don't care about it. So how can we remove some of the complexity and streamline the report itself by removing things that customers don't want? And then finally, how can we personalize this report and personalize in a sense that how can we relate it to their industry? Let them know how they fit in with their competitors. Is this industry standard? Are you deviating from what's happening in the industry? Let that be more actionable so that they could take that information to their boss and say, this is what's happening in our industry. And making it visually consistent, not having these multitude of fonts and colors and all this kind of funkiness, making sure that it feels like one cohesive experience. Even if it's a digital PDF, making sure it feels like it all came from the same system, the same team, the same family of information. And I wanted this to be an iterative process. We make a draft of the report, go back to the customer, and see how we can improve upon it. As with UX design, you should be iterating, you should be making constant improvements and just not one and done. So that was part of the plan as well. So what I really liked about how I had it wrapped around the cubicles is it made it very transparent. It really got people out of what they thought was happening, and they could actually see the steps. They could actually see the gaps in the process and the opportunities for improvement. And it finally made managers aware, like, whoa, we're actually in all these different systems. We're actually doing all these different steps to make this report. This is way more complicated than we thought it was going to be. And another, this is kind of a personal accomplishment with this, was our developers and our security analysts, the ones that were making the report, were very siloed. They were so segmented, in fact, that developers were not even allowed in the room where the security officer sat. Their badge didn't even work. So I knew I needed my developers and my security officers all to be working together to make this product better. So I had to break down these silos. So by putting this Post-it thing on a huge display, it made everybody kind of rally around one visual and start talking about it. For the first time, literally, for the first time, this was them working on a project together. It used to be the security people would either know what they want and just throw it over the wall of the developers, or just do it themselves because they didn't want to tell the developers. And so there was a lot of confusion, animosity, not so much love in between the teams. So it brought them together. They were like, oh, well, this is the process. Cool, we can solve it this way. And there was, for the first time, some dialogue happening amongst the team. So is a service design blueprint for you? I would say, of course it is. Heck yeah. It's really a great opportunity to surface some insights and to get that holistic view to be able to see what's going on. You can also do it solo, or you can do it as a collaboration. So it's really flexible how many people can be working on this, which is great. Start with really low resolution. Start on a whiteboard, start with stickies and Post-it notes. You don't need to have special tools. Sure, if you wanted to put it in Excel or Sketch or whatever your tool of choice might be, you can do that, but you don't have to do that. And I write here, no tech expertise. And when I say tech expertise, what I'm talking about is you don't need to be a technical expert on all the systems that we're talking about here. You don't need to know the ins and outs. All you really need to know is what is it, and that it's there. Just know it exists, kind of get the gist of what it is and what it does, but you don't need to know it perfectly upside down and backwards. And finally, it's customer focused, right? As with user experience designers, when you make the employees process better, you make the end product better for the employees. So that's what's so great about, again, back to that original design of a service design blueprint. Improving the employees process will therefore improve the product that the customer receives. And this is also a great way to surface those recommendations and show the processes and the progress that you can make by making those improvements. So I just want to wrap up by saying that you may have heard of enterprise, you may have heard of service design, and I hope that you can now see that there's an opportunity to have a little bit of crossover and to use a service design blueprint in a slightly different method. Don't be afraid to modify those swim lanes to whatever information that you need to surface when you're working your project. As with anything else in user experience design, nothing's set in stone. We need to be adaptable, learn the foundations and the basics, but if it's, you've got to bend the rules a little bit to make it better for your process and for what you're trying to learn, that's okay. It's okay to do that. Feel comfortable with questioning the status quo and to thinking outside of the box a little bit. And that's all I have.
Awesome. Thank you, Jen.
Sure.
Some great information. The first question we've gotten from Chi is, if you could go back to the beginning of your career, what advice would you give your earlier self? And I'll just make a reminder to all the participants that they can post in our Slack channel, Brown Bag channel, for asking questions of you. But Jen, if you want to answer that question.
Sure. Oh, all the things. What would I change? That's a good one. Don't be so concerned about where you're going to be in 5 years, where you're going to be in 10 years. Sometimes you just got to let things happen. If you told me 5 years from now that I'd be sitting here with you lovely people having this talk, I would have been like, who? What? No, that's never going to happen. So just kind of let things go and see where life and things take you. I would also say learn as much as possible. Always be learning, be ready to consume and learning something new. We have to be really adaptable and be nice. Don't burn any bridges. Make sure that you are always treating people with courtesy and respect, because you don't know how that might come back to bite you in the butt years from now. You want to make sure that you're good to people, and hopefully people will be good to you as well. Does that answer your question, Chi? If not, let me know.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have another question posted yet, but I'd like to know, what is your current work situation like? Do you work on a bigger team or smaller team? How often are you collaborating with other designers versus other
Absolutely.
fields?
So I work at Fidelity Investments, which is a large company, but I'm on a very small team. The normal consumer-facing team of UX designers is like 200. I have 2-3 on my team. And what I work on are tools that the employees use. So I work on items that the Fidelity associates, which is about 50,000 people, use. It could be a mobile app. It could be a website. We have a lot of internal websites and a lot of internal portals that are used. And I'm kind of working at a small internal agency, which is kind of cool. So I'm part of a big company, but it's almost like a UX agency where I work on a project that could be as small as 1 month or as long as a year. It kind of depends on the project. So they come to us, they say we need help, we determine what resources they need. And in my current role, I'm a more UX designer and researcher. So I'm kind of more on that front end of the spectrum. When I talk about spectrum, I'm talking about from research to design to development, right? And there will be a span of skill sets along that spectrum. So my skill set tends to be more in the research, strategy, and visual, UX design side of things versus the front end and the coding and that sort of thing. The beauty of working, and when I talk about enterprise software, it's a lot of time it's internal. Maybe your company owns it and you're making the improvements on that. Is if you're working on an internal product, it's so easy to recruit participants for your tests, for your interviews, because I can just look up in my system and find some employee and say, hey, want to talk to me about this? And they will. Or, hey, do you want to go through my card sort? And they will. They don't have to, but I don't have to go through a recruiting agency. I don't have to go through compliance and making sure I'm doing all the right channels. It's really hard for companies to get participants of customers. It's hard to find them. You'd be surprised how difficult that is. So that's the beauty of my role, is that I can pull from our company database for whatever I need. So I love it. But it is a very small team. there's probably a dozen of us that have, like on the core team, that are developers, full stack developers, researchers, that sort of thing. But about 2 to 3 I would call like UX designers.
Awesome. A few more questions have come in. One is that, do you have a picture of the redesigned report that you made that you'd be able to share?
I wish, which will happen a lot, is I think they kind of like, whoa, found out this was way bigger than they thought, and they bumped me onto another project. So as far as I know, I don't think they ever redid that report. This was a little while ago, and no, I do not have. I would love to have that, but I do not, unfortunately.
Awesome. Yeah, sometimes that happens. So on average, how many rounds of iterations do you do for UX projects? Or do you just iterate internally until you're satisfied and ship once and move on to the next client? I'm specifically curious about service design.
It kind of depends on how much the product is already developed. If you're making changes that it's something that's already established, say the design system is already established, you may not need to do as many iterations. But you're only doing as many, you're doing iterations to find out, to validate your assumptions, right? So it could be big, huge project that you might need to break into small segments sometimes. I'm currently working on the HR project, and there's a lot of things that have to do with human resources. So I might have to do a little mini test, just testing benefits versus just testing 401k, so all those different things that fall under HR. But the classic UX answer is it depends, right? You do the iterations until the complaints stop, and you know that the users are not struggling with it anymore. They're accomplishing their task. That's a good indicator that you've reached success, your hypothesis has been proven, and that you're on the path to building the right thing.
Awesome, thank you. Mm-hmm. Cody makes a comment. He appreciated seeing your portfolio pieces, and was glad to see just regular work stuff, so we could see that. And then a question from Serena. She wanted to ask if you're involved with the interviewing process for UX designers in your company, and if you had any advice or insights to share.
I do. That's very interesting that you asked that, because that is a very, that's asked of me a lot. And for my group, UX Research and Strategy, we're actually in January probably planning a panel of hiring managers and recruiters so that our people can ask those very questions. What are you looking for? What item on my resume will get me through? What item on my resume will put me in the trash? Those sorts of things, right? Like, that's what you want to know. What in my portfolio do you need? And I would say, for talking strictly the interview, answer the question. And I know that sounds really silly because people get off on tangents and talk about all kinds of things, and they don't really answer the question. So even if you get off on a tangent, you just say, answer your question, or just make sure that you do. And don't provide a ton of context about a project that you worked on. Give us the gist, give us a summary, but we don't need to know everything. This is just me speaking. I am helping out in the process of hiring somebody now. I'm helping my manager hire somebody. And we're kind of tag teaming on interviews. And I would say, keep your answers concise. Don't ramble a lot, and practice. So I personally have a list of questions, of UX questions that I have answers to, that I practice. Like, name a time, like the question, name a time that you released something and you would change it. What would you change? Have a story about those kinds of scenarios, because the last thing you want to do is just freeze and not have an answer. Also, have some questions for the person hiring you. Get a feel for, you're interviewing them too, right? Get a feel for their process. Get a feel for if it's a fit for you. What's important to you? Is it important to you that they're on Max and using Sketch? Then find that out if that's what you want to know. Like, really think about, what do you want to know and entering a job, and don't be afraid to find out about it. Find out if it's a new position or somebody left. Ask them why they left. Why are you filling this position? See if they'll tell you the answer. Kind of get some feels for like how honest are they about some of that stuff. You know, like I said, you're interviewing them too. So, and always, always, always know something about the company, because that is a very likely question. Oh, what do you know about us? If you can give a 1 or 2 sentence about, oh, I know you're in this industry, I know you do this, and I saw in the news the other day that this happened, make it positive. But at least show that you've done your homework. That is really important, because a lot of times if people haven't taken the time to even bother to look up the company, that's a mark against you. So just take the time to have a little, you know, oh, I see that you're in X amount of countries, or oh, you just opened your headquarters just moved, you know, something like that. Show that you're at least interested in the company.
Great advice. Thank you. I have about 3 or 4 more questions that have been posted already, if we can try to fit those in. The first one is, do you find it difficult to work with stakeholders in the financial industry?
Can I plead the fifth on that? Yes, I think it's difficult in any industry. There's a lot of traditionalism, and there's a lot of compliance and regulation that you have to be careful of. But like I said before, question the status quo. Why is this document requiring a signature? Is it really necessary? Can we have a digital signature? Why not? Push back on legal. I can tell you of an instance. I was at a previous, it's not where I am right now. We were told that a document required a wet signature, which means they physically had to sign it in pen. And the company was spending millions of dollars FedExing that document to that person and giving that person a return FedEx envelope to send back. Millions. We pushed back. Is it required? Yes, it's required. Are you sure? Really? Why? And then it was like, okay. It was more of a, well, we've always done it this way. Well, if we can legally not require a wet signature, we can save millions of dollars. And when I was there, they were in the process of lifting that and modifying that so that to be more, well, it's more modern, right? But it's okay. I mean, don't be nasty, but it's okay to kind of question some of that status quo, because some of these institutions have been doing the same thing for a really long time. And legal always, you know, it's not so much legal's always going to push back. They might be your nemesis a lot of times. Love them ish, but legal can be an interesting challenge.
All right. Chi says you have a really solid presentation style. Is that something that came naturally, or is it something that required additional work and efforts?
I'd say a little bit of both. I think about what information I want to see in a presentation. I don't want to see 50 words on a slide. I like catchy visuals that draw me in, illustrate the story, pull me along. But I definitely have practiced a lot. I've definitely, I time myself. I, for one, like for Big D, when I did this cognitive bias talk last month, I wrote the whole thing down and then edited it and modified it and kind of worked on it. So I would say, yes, you definitely want to have a plan. Same thing with presenting a case study. It's the exact same thing. Approach when you're going into an interview in your case study, practice what you're going to say verbally out loud. And I really do mean that, not just in your head. Physically say how you're going to walk through that case study. And so that's a perfect place for you to start getting those presentation skills, is when you get that case studies from your class that you want to be presenting to your prospective employer, practice it. Story down.
Awesome. Joanna asks, one struggle that I find with doing research is that I feel like I'm always inconveniencing people with asking for their time. How do you make people that you're interviewing care about the research that you're doing?
I think a lot of it's just building that rapport. I talk to them as I'm talking to you, just, hey, how's it going? How's your day? And just building that rapport from the beginning will help that relationship, help them ease into it, help them feel more open. And also say, I let them know that you're not involved in designing the product. Hopefully you're not. Be honest, but let them know, like, anything you say is not going to hurt my feelings. Don't pull any punches. In fact, I love hearing negative feedback. So, entertain me today too. Be professional, but show that you're a human being and not a robot, and build that rapport with them. Let them feel comfortable, and they'll appreciate. Some people are stiff at first, and they're like, real hesitant. But I have turned the stiffest people around, just being like, just make them feel comfortable. They'll come with you, unless they're really, really hard. But I have never had that. And I've talked to people about financial situations like bankruptcy and repossessions of their cars. That's not exactly topics you want to be talking about to a stranger, is it? But they'll do it. They'll do it if they know that you're helping them and helping others. That'll also open them up.
Awesome. We have about 3 minutes left, so I want to just do this one last question.
Sure.
That is, how have your UX enterprise duties changed over the last 5 years?
How have they changed? Well, they've changed I can tell you they haven't changed in that there's still tons of ugly design out there. Every new place I've worked, I'm like, wow, really? This is still in existence? So you'd be surprised how much old, dated enterprise software is out there. But how it's changed is that people really appreciate you making their life better. And that's another way, Joanna, we were asking, a way to get them to open up the research is like, this is for you. I'm making your life better. So the more you're telling me that it's hard, the better I can make things. And so I think that with enterprise, which, it's low-hanging fruit a lot of times. It's a great career. Don't think that you have to be working at Apple and Google to have like this, sexy career. Like, there's so much opportunity in places like big companies that have old kludgy software that you can make massive improvements. So I would say 5 years ago, it wasn't really something I would have ever considered. And now working internally and on enterprise software, it's something that I really love. And it's even getting so popular, there's specific conferences devoted to it. I think Rosenfeld has, there's talks, this is a topic that's growing, it's important, and it's just a great career prospect. So I think that's what's changed. It's a recognized huge aspect of UX.
Absolutely. Well, Jen, thank you very much for joining us today. You've provided some great, awesome insights. Thanks, Olu, for helping coordinate this, and then Fiwa setting up the brown bag. Really appreciate it. Thanks, everybody, for coming. And Jen, do you have any final remarks?
Please find me. I'm Jennifer Blatz on LinkedIn. Please connect with me. Let me know how I can improve. If you have any suggestions, or how I can help you. I love helping people when I can, but definitely connect to me on LinkedIn, and let's keep this conversation and this communication open. So stay in touch.
Thank you.
Okay.
Have a great day, everyone.
Bye, you too. Thank you.